This mini-series on the magic within astrology is tied up, of course, because everything I do is tied up with the 7-word system. And in this 5th aspect, we're discussing how to develop the idea of the word please. In other words, your vision, your intention, how you cooperate, and the sense of sacredness that you have in life, which are associated with please. So here you are with a client, and you've identified their questions, and you've looked at things in their chart and explained them, and you've tried to form rapport, and yet got them to face up to difficulties and been quite clear about the need to confront conflict and so on. Then what? Well, it's to do with future pacing, it's called, where you get them to project their imagination into the future and see it as good. Bearing in mind that many clients, most clients, come during a time of difficulty. That happens to be the way it goes. Most people assume that if things are going well in their life, they don't need to consult an astrologer or anyone else. If there's problems in their life, they want somebody to talk them out. That might help. Get some opinions, points of view. That certainly will. So that's why they've come. And your job is really to turn that around so that when they leave, they're more optimistic than when they arrived. And we do this by changing how they think about the future. Most people habitually believe that what happened in the past will happen in the future. It's how we're all trained. And we have to undo that training in this interview. And we get an hour and a half or so to do it in. And you have to move the person into an expanded, delightful sense of self and see that projected onto opportunities in the future. This generates hope. It's like in a dark tunnel, you look for the light, and if there is no daylight, then you light a candle. So it may be that that's what your client is experiencing, a dark experience in their life, a tunnel, and they need the light. So perhaps the most important thing that we can give them is that light. And it may be that you can look at the chart and you can see opportunities that they haven't noticed. There are some clues, of course. A strong Mercury would suggest you ought to talk about writing and perhaps speaking. A well-placed moon, you might talk about duties of mothering in some capacity, and so on. There's plenty of information about this. So you might see clues in the chart to suggest what they can do, and they might not have thought of. And yet, it should be lightly delivered. You don't say, "Oh, you are a so-and-so." That is actually black magic. You can't do that to people and remain clear of conscience. It's just wrong to do that. You must not bully somebody into becoming something just because you think it's better for them. We've got no idea what kind of karma they're acting out, what kind of choices they've made before incarnation. We don't know. We don't know why they came, and so you don't know as an astrologer what they should do next. But what you can do is open up the realm of maybe this, maybe that. What if? You can put a series of ideas forward so that they can consider things which they hadn't before, and underline the importance of confidence and say, yeah, I can see you doing that. Why not? I can see it in the chart. And if it can be seen in the chart, it has a special authority. People come to me and they say, what does my chart say? And like, the chart doesn't speak, I speak. I can interpret the chart whatever way I want. And what I want is to interpret it optimistically for them. I don't want to put on them what I want in my life. I want them to discover through the agency of this consultation what they want in their life. So even though we're putting ideas forward that might work for them, we mustn't be dogmatic about that. Be suggesting, be nuanced and hinting. And what will happen is they'll respond to one or another of the suggestions. If you put several, they'll respond better to one of them than another. And you notice that response. And so you listen when they speak, you hear what they say. If they talk about being a writer, of course you're going to look at their Mercury. If they talk about being an artist, you might want to look at their Venus. Sportsman, their Mars. There's some very obvious clues. And you hear what they say, and then look at that and openly discuss the possibilities. Again, non-dogmatically. You cannot say that Mars in Pisces is so-and-so. You can say that it's possibly so-and-so, or quite a few of your clients have had that experience, but you've got to leave it open-ended so that they can make the choices. So rather than simply state what you think, you hint, and then you hear what they say by way of feedback, and you notice there are other clues apart from the words that they give you. There's what they do with their body. They might cover their body up at one of those suggestions, or open it up and come forward and really listen. They might turn their head to listen, and then that shows interest. You've got to pick up on these subtle clues. If you've ever had a gypsy come to your door and make predictions to you, they're very good at just delivering alternatives and pick up the automatic response, the unconscious response that you give them, and then they'll focus on that. I can see you're having a hard time at work, blank expression, or at home, anxious expression, and then they start talking about home. So they pick up on the clues and deliver into that. That's how it works. And it does work. It's not necessary for you to prove that astrology is meaningful. What your job is as an astrologer is to give the client an opportunity to have another way of seeing their lives, themselves, and what's possible. And most particularly, as we're going through this time, you give them the option of choosing an optimistic future according to their own sense of what would be good for them. And you do this in a way which is somewhat ambiguous, so that they can fill in the gaps. Now, one thing that we all know, and we can say with absolute confidence, is this: things are changing. How could it not be true? Everything always changes for eternity. However, when you deliver that truism to your client in a certain way, it helps them. Things are changing. Oh, you can see that in the chart. Yeah, things are changing for you. You've had a bad time, but things are changing. It's so empowering to know that you don't have to put up with what you've been putting up with. And it is the truth. It's always the truth. We don't know how quickly. We don't know whether the change is for the better. However, the next thing to say is things are changing, and how you approach that makes a big difference to what the changes will be. If you look for an optimistic outcome, that makes it much more likely. If you look to expect the same old problems that you've got, then that's likelier to cement them in place. So look optimistically at the future, and you'll have an optimistic outcome in the future. That's what you're telling them. And that's what you're doing to them as well, making them look optimistically into the future and creating for them a better outcome. If there is no other thing that you give them in your consultation, if you make all manner of mistakes about your interpretations, it doesn't matter very much. It's ill-disciplined and doesn't do very well for the reputation of astrology to say something wrong. But what it doesn't do to them is it doesn't corrupt them. However, if you dump on them bad news in the future, it's wrong. It's black magic, and it's something you must avoid. You give them light. You give them optimism. You give them hope. You give them faith in themselves, and you tell them things are changing, and if you're optimistic, they'll change for the better. Deliver that message, and that will make a difference.